Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of The Gentleman's Jury. I'm your host, Robbie,
And I'm your co-host, Zach.
and today we just want to talk about, us coming back and some of the things to expect in the future and kind of why we were gone for so long.
That's right.
Um, so one of the reasons why we took this long hiatus was obviously the holidays, which are a challenging time when you, like me, have a new family. You're trying to get everything kind of put together. You're going and visiting family, and I know that it can be hard for us to find time to record. And then after that, we were dealing with some personal family issues that came up shortly after the holidays. But now we're here to say we're back. And
Yep.
we have definitely not forgotten to check the news to kind of give our input on some of the things going on.
You didn't even
And
need to check the news. You just heard it. There's just no way around it. You had to hear it.
right. And one of the first things that we can talk about real quick is our thoughts on the Capitol Hill attack or protest or riot or however you would describe it.
I'd describe it as a protest that turned violent, just like any other.
Right. Let's kind of talk about why that why they might have decided to protest Capitol Hill.
Oh,
And some of
you're
the other things we've heard
um,
about.
like the leading to the protesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
like
okay. So like the events that led up to it.
yeah, exactly. And then kind of some of the theories behind why it happened. Like I know for instance one of the theories that I find a little less hard to believe because I feel like they're trying to manipulate it to seem less conservative is saying it was actually Antifa.
See, now that's the one that I feel like is more believable, and like not like that it's all Antifa, but all it takes is a few people to rile up an entire crowd. They're already angry. You
That
know,
is tr- that is
it,
true.
it is true. Like it only takes a few to get on their soapbox and be like, "Let's storm the Capitol. Let's storm the Capitol," under the guise of we're doing it for good intentions, but in all reality, we're doing it because fuck the system.
One of the interesting things that why the Capitol? I mean, that was the probably my most interesting part of this whole protest. That they, um, I understand protesting outside the Capitol, but it seemed kind of deliberate in the place in like just where the protest was held.
See, I don't know the exact placing. I know it was in our capital, and honestly, I think that's the best way to do it when you want federal change.
Right,
'Cause
but it was
the
at the Capitol building.
Yeah, and that's the part where I don't fully I understand what they doing for doing it. You're close to the politicians that you really dislike right now, the corrupt and the uncorrupt. I think we can all agree there are corrupt politicians. That's just how it is.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, there's always someone out there for themselves, and they're gonna find their way in there. It's just trying to lower it. But I get that. I understand that. What I think really went wrong for them in the sense of this is that it seemed like they were protesting to put Trump back into power, which is not the way it should have been done. That is not the message you want from any party, because it's like, let's say when Trump won 4 years ago, if there had been a protest like that trying to put, God, her name all of a sudden slips my mind.
Hillary
Yeah,
Clinton.
Hillary Clinton, my bad. Yes, Hillary Clinton. It's the same. We'd be seeing it as a usurpation as well as a coup, rather than a protest against corruption. And even with this instance, like one of the big things that led up to it was the possibility of a rigged election. And
Some people would say a high possibility.
oh yeah, and you know what? Honestly, I completely agree. I didn't think that until the Democratic Party decided, hey, we're going to deny you the 6 to 7 days it takes to look at all these machines and tell you whether it was rigged or not. under the stick guys and like the willingness to be like, well, if there's nothing to hide, you wouldn't hide it, right?
Right. Where did you hear that? I kind of followed the election pretty closely because I used to have a large stake in who was running back in the 2016 election. I was joining the military, and Trump was the obvious candidate when you were joining the military if you wanted that nice like 2% pay raise.
Yeah. So my news source for this one, and this one, I don't know how biased this news source is. It was just a recent one I found. I had heard that prior to this news source, just from some people talking, but I don't know where they got it as well. The news source was OAN, I think, or something like that. It's one that's not like a mainstream news source, uh, but it to me it did kind of feel like it was kind of Republican sided, but nothing near to like what Fox used to be.
Okay, so you're saying it's slightly more center, but definitely right leaning.
I would say it is, but obviously I came into it with this election rigging issue up onto debate, and I don't watch it regularly. So during this, they were definitely leaning towards the right side on what was being said about the rigged elections. They were talking to people about it. They weren't saying, "Oh, we believe it's this case," but let's talk to some of the people that are Republicans that are willing to speak up about this and what their thoughts are, and all of them were like, yeah, it's kind of rigged. And they even talked to Democratic people that were like, yeah, in all honesty, they should give it to them. You know, the ones that aren't really all about their party, they're about what's right.
Right. So I'll definitely have to look into that news source to kind of get each more of whether it's super right leaning or if it's center right leaning.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it's news channel on DirecTV, so obviously all of those, it's hard. You have to take everything they say with a grain of salt.
right. And speaking of the election, since we definitely see that as kind of a lead up into the Capitol riots.
Yeah.
How did you feel about going to bed and then waking up and all of a sudden a couple of states that the Republicans are leading in, just jumped? Like they
Oh,
said they
that,
had
that,
stopped the
that jump
count.
in votes. Yeah, that to me is unbelievable. I do not believe it for a minute. I do expect there to be votes, to come in and stuff like that. But for such a huge jump overnight sounds ridiculous to me. There were many cases of people trying to rig the election by giving out, pen or not pens, but markers and Sharpies rather than pens, because that would cancel your vote. Because if it's not done in pen, it doesn't count.
Right,
Uh,
because when it scans, it doesn't read what you voted. So
yeah,
then somebody could go behind you, actually go and pin, check what you voted, and then
yes. And the other thing is they said it was all because of mail-in votes was their thing. What
right,
blew my mind on that though is that almost 100% of those votes were for Biden. Not
right. It
there were
wasn't
there was like 10 for Trump or 19 I think was what it was to like the 100,000 that came in. 19 were for Trump. There was none for the like a middle, a third party, and all of it was to Biden.
right, and I think that's the part that really stuck out to me because obviously a lot of Trump supporters went in person because that's what he was telling people to do,
Yeah.
whereas Biden was pushing more for mail-in voting. Um, but third party, there were no third party votes coming in for that. And one of the big things I had read in an article was a group of statisticians and mathematic people and excuse me, and then a group of all these guys who run numbers and figure out the statistics that it was nearly impossible. It was so highly improbable that all those votes came in for Biden.
Yes, and I think that's one of the big things. So that's why we're like, let us check it, and they won't because they know they're going to get caught. They know they'd get caught, and they're afraid.
Right, but we did go through that whole process after the election of like filing lawsuits and things like that. Trump's team did that, and they still ended up losing.
They ended up losing, but they weren't allowed access to the machines or anything like that. They were like, if what that news station did say was true, which I that is a huge claim to make. So I'm going to assume that it is true, because if it's not, then that just immediately throws them out as a news source completely. If you were to make this claim, but if they did not allow them access to those machines as evidence, then the fact is you have no case, because the case is in those machines. Those are what can be hacked and information changed in. There's a
Right.
reason they've been outlawed in other states, that they're not allowed to be used for voting.
And speaking of this whole voting, how interesting is it that at the same time Trump lost the main election, the Democratic Party lost? I mean, they lost seats in the House, but they still have the House. And Georgia, of all states, swung blue for both their seats in the Senate.
See, that was another BS thing, because when it came down to it, that was the huge thing, is like they have to win Georgia too, otherwise they're not going to have power in Senate at all.
Right, and everything kind of led to them going, oh well, we also won both those seats.
And I honestly, I can't believe it. I'm not going to say I refuse to believe it, but I feel like it's just so highly unlikely that this state, that Georgia, who was voting mainly red up to that point, lost all three of those, you know,
Right.
and
And that's the crazy thing is you were watching, so like you watch the margins in Michigan and I think it was Wisconsin, and they were pretty close, and then after we all went to, a lot of people went to bed and woke up in the morning, they weren't very close.
not at
um
all.
Pennsylvania was, I'm sorry, no, yeah, Pennsylvania was very close, and then all of a sudden Trump gained a phenomenal lead, and then Biden crawled his way towards a victory there.
Yeah, and
And they
I feel like there is so much fishy shit going on. I honestly think that we need to roll back at how we do voting, and it needs to be signature based like it used to be. It needs to be, you go in, you fill out your ballot, you sign it, and you put it in there. And that they
Right,
go in and they make sure there are no similar signatures, and there are no signatures of those that are passed, that have are deceased. And it needs to be city to city, going to their town hall and doing it that way.
right. And so with this whole election, um, obviously that being a leading factor in the protests in the Capitol,
Yeah.
another factor I think most people tend to overlook because it's a touchy subject is how about the fact that maybe some of these people were fed up with how some of these senators and representatives were leading their states during the Black Lives Matter protests.
Dude, I don't even think it matters just about the Black Lives. It might be just for the Corona too. All of it. I think all of it is a weight, and people are getting crushed under it, and now they're starting to fight back. And they don't all know how to properly fight back. Not everyone knows the right way to do it. And
Right,
I think that, like I was saying earlier, they did it as a usurpation and as a cute. Yeah, I cannot say the word all of a sudden. As a Dang it, you know what? I'm just gonna skip the word because I can't think of it all of a sudden. A coup. That's what it is. They used it. I know. I can't believe they had to fight that word so much. But they used it as a coup to try to put Trump back into power. If they had been there saying that they were fed up with corrupt politicians, and that they wanted a re-election, and that they wanted to get rid of these politicians for their corruption, like that, I still can't believe that it passed. But the $600 stimulus that we got, they gave tons and tons of billions of dollars to other countries when we can barely support ourselves right now. Our
right,
people are starving, or losing their housing, losing their jobs, losing anything that they own. They were out on the streets. They're hungry. They are thirsty. They are homeless. People that worked hard for their lives. There are people losing their businesses. And instead of taking care of your own people, you decide gender studies in another country that will literally kill you on sight for saying anything against being heterosexual. If you're gay or anything like that, you're immediately shot on sight. That's another fight for another day. Right now, we need to take care of our own people.
Right, and that brings up a huge point. I always argue with a lot of my friends, obviously not you,
Yeah.
but when I get into these debates, why is it that the United States has to play peacekeeper all the time? And then the second we go, hey, let's take a second, all of our representatives and such go, well, no. How about we focus on everybody else real quick? Because obviously they're what needs to be fixed. They're the issue. The United States is fine. We always survive. We're fine. We don't need to worry about anything.
And see, I think that's what one of the positives out of this riot was. And there are very few positives that came out of this riot. But one of them is I think it scared politicians again. And that is what's needed. They need to be fearing that they can be going hung on the streets at any moment for them deciding uh, deciding that something else is more important than the American people. And I'm not here to condone violence. I don't think we need to go out there and hang them, but I think they need to be reminded that they are not empowered. They serve us. It's our money, not theirs, that they are spending. We give it to them so that they can take care of us and our country, not so they can go and take care of some other one, or they can go line the pockets of other corrupt politicians to get what they need.
Right. So then let's bring so obviously kind of we've touched base on the Capitol Hill issue, and
Yeah.
we've definitely recovered the election.
Yeah.
Let's kind of move forward a little bit.
Okay.
In 3 days, we know Joe Biden will be sworn into office. How do
Yeah.
you think his first year as president will affect the U.S.?
I think it's going to affect it greatly. I think a lot of his decisions are going to make or break whether he's still president. And I don't know if that means that there's going to be a impeachment on him or a civil war. It all depends on how radical he goes. Because obviously, as you can tell, tensions are high between people.
Right.
And a big cause of that is our social media.
That's actually what I was about to
Yeah, I was like, I think I know what you're about to go into.
bring up. Social media's impact on not just the election, but our everyday to day life. I mean, I logged on to Facebook today, and the very first thing I saw was an article or was a post about somebody talking about how in fact here let me pull it up real quick.
Okay.
It essentially it was like without the interference of white people in Africa, they would essentially be a Ugandan paradise or a Wakanda paradise. They were comparing the fictional world of Wakanda. Here it is. Chairman Omila Yashela is the one who tweeted it and said
Yeah,
hashtag fascism is only a term used to define a phenomenon. God, I don't know why I couldn't read that word there for a second.
yeah.
Um, where white people do what to other white people what white people have been doing to hashtag African and other colonized and oppressed peoples for centuries. The real struggle of hashtag Africans is against hashtag colonialism and hashtag colonial powers. And I couldn't help but laugh at that because we haven't been a colonial power since like 1900.
Oh yeah.
And the term fascism is this. I think the best part of this too, because social media I think is what's breeding a high level of ignorance amongst people, and that's why we're dealing with a lot of the situations we're dealing with. The man who posted it was from the Africans People's Socialist Party. Fun fact: fascism is a branch of socialism. Just ask Mussolini
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah.
Hitler.
That's exactly. I feel like history's repeating itself so much because guess what? You've got a man in power that made you hate a certain group of people.
And
Exactly what's happening. It's repeat.
I think we're actually seeing more of a repeat of what led to the Civil War than we are to
Oh yeah,
World War
definitely.
Two.
But the I think it's fear of a power struggle and a power change. And I think it's one of the big reasons is no one talks to each other anymore. It is my side or the highway. It's my idea or the highway.
Right,
No one
and then
wants to talk about policies and have a good debate. They immediately get offended and are immediately like, "I want to fight you. I'm taking social high ground, so I'm better than you," which is ridiculous because neither of them are social highways.
right, and I think social media has a large part to play with that. I mean, I log on to social media, right? And
Yeah,
say I decide to go on Facebook, but I don't want to use my Facebook that I'm connected with my friends and family with. So I make a fake Facebook. And then I go and I just go and I stir the pot. I just post something blatantly racist or blatantly homophobic or blatantly fascist, and people jump on that. But I don't have to face any repercussions for doing something like that because I'm anonymous. And I think that anonymity is what's really driving people to this point where we feel we can say what we want and you don't have to be polite about it. You never have to
there's no
respect anyone because everyone else is going to agree with you.
well, there's no consequences, even with the people that disagree with you.
Right.
However wrong you are, if you were to say that in public, you'd have 6 or 7 guys who just turn around and beat your ass for saying it.
Right. My mom used to get really mad at my dad because he used the N word one time, and he about beat my dad. She about beat my dad for using that word because obviously it was something that shouldn't be said.
Yeah,
But you do that online, and people can attack you, but who's really stopping you from doing it again?
yeah. In all reality, if we had it my way, the N word would not be a bad word at all. It would be nice to know that there was no word off limits because there was no word that was that hurtful to someone.
Right, but the fact of the
But
matter is, history has made that word as
it's
there's a
taboo.
large
It's
stigma
taboo.
to it.
Yeah, and it sucks because that's the fantasy world we wish we lived in, where it didn't exist. But we don't get that.
And kind of going off of that, kind of into a tangent a little bit,
But
because obviously we don't want to get into wordplay and why certain
yeah,
words should and shouldn't be said. Um, we are trying. I mean, if you notice, some people with this whole PC movement and everything else, it's really just trying to prevent people from getting their feelings hurt.
see, I don't even think it's that. I think it's more of the superiority complex and the guilt that they feel less guilty if they say someone else is better than them, and that they feel like if I say, if I'm offended for you, I'm doing my part, even if there's no reason, you should be feeling offended. Like, there's no reason someone should be going to like a McDonald's and seeing an African American buying a meal, and then you give them a fist up, like, yeah, I did my part, so you could go buy that burger.
Right.
That's fucking ridiculous.
No, absolutely. I agree. That is ridiculous. And I think that also has a large part to play in this. I mean, I definitely feel some of the left, more far radical people are radicalizing minority groups by telling them, I can make it better. I can fix this for you. As if they needed your help, in
Now, is
order
that
to
right or
better their
left?
lives.
You said right winged. I feel like that's more left winged.
No, that's what I said. It was definitely left.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say right wing. Because as I say, right wing is more of we leave you alone. Like, we're not here to make it a big topic, in my
Right.
opinion.
But don't
No,
get me wrong, there's definitely some extremists on the right wing that try and put some of those communities down.
as I say, there's those extremists, and those are the ones that are yelling, "The South will rise again." But I think you still got those on the left side too. It's not just a one-way street.
No, absolutely. But I thought you brought up a good point. This sense of guilt and, oh, I can wash away the crimes of being white, or I can wash away the crimes of my I hate this word, but my privilege
And
to
see, that's what blows my mind Because first off, you shouldn't feel guilty for being white. You're born that way. It's just like an African American shouldn't feel bad about being black, or caramel if he's half black, half white. There's no reason you should feel guilty or bad about the color of your skin. That's complete racism. If you feel like there's a skin color that's bad, there's something wrong with you.
Right. And I think a lot of people tend to go, well, maybe because I'm white, I do have some advantages. And I like to point out, you know, the unfortunate truth, or I wouldn't say unfortunate. The truth of the matter is, white people make up the majority of the population of the world,
Yes.
which means if you take a handful of people, right, you throw in every group, blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians, into a bag, and you go, okay, who are the poorest people going to be? You reach into that bag, you're gonna get, you know, you're gonna get a handful of a small group of blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, but you're also gonna get a decent handful of whites because we make up the large majority of the population,
Yep.
and you,
So I'll say that. I'll say it this way. There is white privilege. Okay, we have a privilege. We're not seen as a threat among the biggest populace. Like you said, we're the majority. So obviously, we're not looked at a different way, like how African Americans look at whites. They see them as not all of them, obviously, but they see them as enemies. Like you see a white cop, you see an African American cop, you know, they're gonna act different depending on who they see.
right,
It's still a cop, but hey, the skin color is different, so this one's probably chiller than the other. Something like that. But that's completely irrelevant for the situation. Now, I'm also going to bring up this is yes, we have white privilege, but that doesn't determine where you're going to be at the end. You know, you can have it all, but if you do nothing, you're going to be at the bottom. You're going to end up poor. You're going to have no money. You
right,
could have nothing, but if you struggle through that mud and you give it everything you've got, you have the potential to be the richest man. You have the potential to become the next Elon Musk. You know,
right. You set your own
yeah,
limits. I think I had recently listened to an Audible that is it's been super inspirational. Um, and it's by a black former Navy SEAL named David Goggins. The book's called Can't Hurt Me, and it talks about how he grew up. And at the beginning of the book, it talks about how he was a rich black kid with an extremely abusive father,
yes,
and eventually his mother and him ran away. They finally got out of that situation, and so he moved to a small town where he was the poor black kid, and
okay,
it was a racist town, so he had to deal with racism. Um, and instead of dealing with it, at first he kind of like compartmentalized it as a oh, this is my reality now. This is what I have to deal with.
yes.
He changed his mindset to such a degree that he is now a best-selling author. He holds the record for most pull-ups in a day. He did so much because he changed his mindset and held himself accountable.
And see, that's the big thing. A lot of people don't hold themselves accountable. And
Right, and I,
go ahead. I'll finish what I was saying after.
and that was kind of what I was getting at. We've allowed ourselves to stop being accountable, and if we are not accountable, how can we hold somebody else accountable?
It's like the simple. It's the same with like, let's say, love. How can you love someone else if you can't love yourself? It's like if you can't judge yourself and realize what's wrong with you, how can you judge someone else and decide what's wrong with them?
Right,
How can you let someone else tell you that something's wrong with you when in fact you should be self-checking looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, this is what's good about me, this is what I want to work on because I feel like it's wrong, not have someone else tell you it's wrong, unless, like, obviously there's some stuff that goes on that it helps to have an outside view, but not just some random person on the street.
Right. And I think that's the big thing. We've allowed ourselves to get comfortable with the idea that, A, if we're feeling bad, we can just hop on social media,
Hmm.
argue some point, and feel better about ourselves.
Because there's someone out there that feels the exact same way as you, and they'll give you validation. In all
Exactly.
reality, they're suffering at the same with the same problem that you are, and you both need to change. You
Right.
don't.
Get out of your group and grow with the people that want you to grow.
Yeah, better yourself. You want to be out there to better yourself.
E-
Don't stand. And you're gonna grow no matter how old you are. There
Right.
there there's always new experiences.
I mean, Picasso. I mean, everyone knows who Picasso is. He didn't get famous until he was a lot older.
Yeah, I think it was like in his 30s, wasn't
No, he got really. I mean, he was really famous in his 60s.
it? Okay. Well, I mean, he got even more famous when he was dead. So I mean, there's that too. But
Right, but the point is, Leonardo da Vinci wasn't recognized as a genius for other than being like a world famous painter. He wasn't recognized for his genius and some of the things he did biologically until after he died.
yes,
You know,
and it's one of those things that you don't see the results till the end.
exactly.
Uh,
And maybe you never do feel the results, but the world might feel the results. If you strive to better yourself, maybe you're doing something better than you know.
yeah,
But
it it'll have a positive, you know, effect.
I definitely feel I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. We'll reel it back in a bit. So now you like we said, there's an anonymity, and there's those people that agree with you, and then
Yeah,
there's you yourself, who feels so righteous in whatever it is you're doing. I mean, I do it. I know I
yeah.
do it. Sometimes, my wife will stop me and tell me, "Hey, you're wrong," and I might argue the point, and but if I'm wrong, I have to learn to grow and say, you know what, that was right. I was wrong in that situation.
Gotta be able
And
to.
go ahead.
I was gonna say you got to be acceptable, accept when you're wrong. You got to be able to listen to the other side.
Right.
Which, going back to the social media part, it's difficult because if you look at Twitter and if you look at Facebook and even Google, actually Google, it's more about where you live than anything, which side you'll see, because they do it by generalization of your area. If you're a right winged area, they're going to show you right wing stuff. If you're a left wing area, they're going to show you left wing stuff. But if you're in Twitter or Facebook, they almost mute the right side. They don't completely. They like to. And if there's anything that they don't feel that's right, they'll block and mute it. And a big case of that is they blocked Trump. They completely banned him for life. And their reasoning behind it was, well, he can incite violence. Well, so can anyone else. It's happened. You can't tell me that the BLM protests and riots didn't become violent. So where's the repercussion for those that set that up? There were
Right.
none. There was no blocking for those that set it up. But you're going to ban this one man because one of them went awry. And it's the same with was it that one app? I think it's called Parler.
Yep.
So
I think Facebook. They tried to set it up on Facebook's server or some type of subsidiary for it, and Facebook shut that down.
I think they shut it down, but they also so Apple and Google App Store both removed them from their App Store. As soon as this went happen, they removed it. They said it was a site for violence, when in all reality, it was an exact same site like Twitter and Facebook, where people could go and share their ideas. The thing was, is they didn't mute, they didn't delete people's sayings. They weren't over there playing Big Brother or CIA agent where they're monitoring you and saying, "Oh, this guy's gonna go and shoot up a place." They were there, and obviously, if there was anything big, they'd probably block it. I don't know. I never was on Parler, but they got deleted. They got removed, and they were like, "We're no longer going to support you. You're off. You're gone." And what blows my mind is Apple for sure has in their system or their was it security agreements?
Um,
I can't think
our terms of service.
terms of service. Thank you. Um, in it, it literally has a section where it says no app, any social app will not be held responsible for what is said on it. It will not be held by what the users say.
Right.
That goes for Twitter, Facebook, and any other social app. But because Parler didn't fit their narrative, or which I assume is what it was, because they're known for blocking the right and allowing the left to talk. Uh, since it didn't fit the narrative, they just instant like, yeah, screw these people, they're gone. This is the excuse we need. But they don't hold that same standard to any of the other apps. Like, you tell me why Twitter and Facebook have not been removed for the violence that they've incited, or when Al Qaeda or ISIS was recruiting off of them, causing violence, like bombings and stuff like that. They were not removed for that. So why is Parler being removed for this protest that obviously became violent? But in terms, it did not kill hundreds of people. It did not kill thousands. It did not injure hundreds and thousands. People got hurt, don't get me
Uh,
wrong,
some people,
but
I think, a couple people died.
there were a couple deaths. I think there was I think five last time I checked. There were five. There was the woman that was shot in the neck that died, and then there were four that went to the hospital. Or I think there was like 16, but four of the 16 died later in the hospital. So, like I said, it is not without casualties. It was not without its violence. But I don't think that even comes close to the amount of violence that has been caused by Twitter and Facebook.
Right, especially when you put into context that a lot of those Black Lives Matter protests were probably um, arranged through Facebook or Twitter.
They were definitely arranged through them. What's crazy to me is it's like even without Black Lives Matter movements, even if you were to take those numbers out, the violence is still beyond that because you still had the ISIS recruiting, you had the people that were still going in and you know being kamikaze, blowing themselves up, setting up bombs. For the distinct purpose of ISIS's purposes, to further their ideals and to try and blow people up, kill people. it,
Right,
it happened. It happened regardless, but they were not muted. They were not banned for causing violence. But this one time was the exception. This was the one. This
right,
was the one.
because
And
it's the reason I think it this one time it's always going to be this one time is because what people want, and I don't know why they want it. If you ever pick up just a normal history book, not the crap that people have been writing about today, where they're like, "Oh, Stalin was actually a good guy," or Mao didn't kill millions of his people.
dude,
Socialism works. If you don't pick up those books and you pick up an actual history book and you look at how socialism affects people and how these companies are censoring us, not us in particular, but right-winged people. If you look at how systematic it seems, they are systematically censoring people that
yep,
don't agree with what they want. It's almost reminiscent of the the Leninist revolution in Russia, the brown shirts of Nazi Germany.
yep.
I mean, Mao Zedong was dealing with the fact that I think he was at they were during he kind of rose up during World War II, so he had that as his cover. But now you go and you look at China, and then you're like, oh no, everything is great here. But you look in like the Mongolian region, hundreds of Muslims are put into re-education camps.
It, it, I'll just say it now. It's the victor. Who's ever the victor gets to write the history books, and that's who's ever going to see as right.
Right, and big tech, who we know as Facebook, Google, Twitter, these guys won. They won the internet. They own it.
They own it, and it's scary because they've been trying to be getting outed, but they're so strong. They have such a presence.
Right, and
Like,
and they control what everyone else sees. How can you
yeah,
out someone that controls what you put out?
well, I'll tell you a few things. One that I've heard is the creator of the internet. Those guys that designed it and created it have uh, have been in talks, and I saw like a partial of an article, and I don't even know where it was exactly from. So I hope this is true in a sense, but they were talking about making an internet too, because they quoted saying that the internet was never meant to be censored like this. It was
Right,
never meant to be used like this.
the internet was meant to be essentially a giant library. You
It
could go
really
in
was.
there and post information, and people would come in and do that. And then it kind of shifted into entertainment, which is fine.
Yeah.
I remember growing up in the early 2000s to mid 2000, early to mid 2000s, leading into 2010. You go on YouTube, and the funniest thing on YouTube was a guy pretending to be Star. They call him the Star Wars kid. He was pretending to flail about a
Uh,
white lightsaber with the freaking
yeah.
golf club,
Or the
and
nun.
everyone just laughed.
Yeah. And that's one of those things. It's like YouTube and Twitch. They all started as something, and they've both been changing to become something else.
Right, because what everyone wants is for everyone to stop being so politically or being. I'm sorry, not stop being. They want people to be more politically sensitive, so they can push an idea to push more and more people to believe whatever the fuck they want.
It's because they use the guise of righteousness to push their narrative, whether it's wrong or right. Because if you are to challenge them, it is meaning you're going against what is truly right for the people,
Right, and
even though
that's
that they use it as a guise.
exactly, and that's the real issue.
Yep, and it's not the issue because what is truly being pushed there is wrong. Being PC is not wrong. It is okay to be like, you know what, yeah, these people, you don't want to talk down to them, you want to treat them equally. It's just like anything.
Right, but you shouldn't even have to think like that. You should just think every person's a person. I
Exactly.
was lucky, and I grew up in a multiracial home. My grandfather's Native American. My sister, I have a half sister who's black. I have, you know, my
We grew,
youngest sister's white.
yeah,
I grew up going to school and never thought anything of anyone being different than me, other than if they were smarter or not.
yeah.
And that's the other thing. When did we stop judging people? When did intelligence become the issue?
I don't know because in all reality, like I grew up in a full white home. You know this, Italian family, and I grew up. I never knew what hate was on another race. Like, I got along with the Latinos. I got along with well, we obviously don't have very many here, but with the African Americans that were here, I got along with all of them. You know, we not be the tightest, but none of us hated on each other. You know,
Right,
we all got along. I
right,
never knew
because there
what
was
hate
there was
was.
respect there.
Yeah, well, yeah, and no one here taught you hate. It's something that people learn. Now, same can't be said for like Central America, like Midwest area, or just mid of America,
Right,
because
or south, the south.
well, even the South, like, so I think it's also kind of different because even though you have the same skin color, the people where they live act differently and are treated differently because, like, coming from my grandma's background, she turns out she's she's not racist. Like, she'll go purposely out and like yell at someone or anything, but she's very wary of African Americans. She grew up in New York. She was chased by them when she was growing up, and she obviously learned from that as I don't trust them. So it's not that she hates you, but you're gonna have to work to gain trust. You got an uphill battle if you want to talk to her.
Right, and I definitely think that's a shared emotion through a lot of people who are older. My grandfather, who's native, has distrust naturally for Hispanics because a Hispanic had taken advantage of his sister.
Yes, and see that's a reasonable reaction though too, is to
Right.
be like distrustful, you not to hate, but to be like, you know what, you got to work because one of you guys fucked me so bad that it takes time. It's like if a guy and a girl, like if a girl or a guy gets raped, they're gonna look at the opposite gender and be like, I don't trust you. You're gonna have to show me why I should trust you.
Absolutely. And I think nobody feels that more than, yeah, well, I'm not gonna say names, but there's somebody that you and I both know who you probably felt that kind of like distrust from. Not just because, and it's just because of what that person went through. Um,
I'm gonna tell you this honestly. I'm so ignorant that even if it was that case, I didn't notice, and I know who you're talking about. I didn't
right.
know, but I'm also their favorite. So
But the point was is even in other places there was some distrust.
yeah,
Um,
and I remember being touchy feely because I knew about it. And I think that's a big thing is if you go in knowing what's happened and you know a little bit of the history before you go in and you can prepare yourself for it, I feel like there's better understanding between you two, and feelings don't get hurt as easy.
absolutely. But the back kind of, because we both seemed to went down the same tangent.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there's obviously distrust. And um, how
It,
do you
it,
think social media perpetuates that? I mean, that's the real question I was going for. How do you think social media perpetuates distrust amongst people?
I think the big distrust is that, like you're turned away from going and talking to your neighbor. Why expand your friend group? Like, why go talk to your neighbors? Why go talk to any of your friends about these hard issues when you can do it online in a safe space with a group of people that already think the exact same way, rather than a possibility of going to your friend and being like, "Hey, man, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or I'm central," and them being like, "Well, I'm not, dude. I'm the opposite, or I disagree with that," and then him being like, "Well, I mean, how could you be that stupid? Why would you be okay with this and this?" You
Right, and
know,
then it goes into a back and forth.
and it goes in the back and forth. And obviously sometimes it does derail and it becomes a fight, like, of a yelling match and a screaming match, which is something you gotta catch yourself at and be like, okay, enough's enough,
Right,
you
but
know,
the
I'll talk
benefits,
to you. But yeah,
obviously, before you get to the yelling match, the benefits of learning about the other side has just, you know compounded
it,
your knowledge.
it's good. You should never be one sided because when you're one sided, you become radicalized, and that is a scary thing to be. To not understand what the other person is possibly thinking causes no issues to be fixed or understood.
And
If you don't understand the issues of your enemy, how are you ever gonna A, beat them, or B, settled? You know, you can't just go nuke your problems like we did in World War II, where we go and nuke Japan because they won't give up. Just because let's say I'm a Republican, obviously, like I said, I'm not either because I really don't consider myself for either. I'm kind of both, but I know I'm more right than I am left. The thing is, you can't just go and be like, well, we're going to nuke all the Republicans because they disagree with us and they obviously won't give up their ideals, or vice versa. You know,
right,
that's not a solution anymore. That should never have been the solution in the first place, but that is just not a solution. But there are many people with that mindset of, you know what, fuck them. Their life, the fact that they don't agree with me means they threw away their life, their reason to live, because I'm in the right, and if you don't think that way, you're the devil.
and I think that's interesting because that brings up the next point I was going to get to. Um, how does that affect family members? I mean, I've seen some very close friends cut tons of their own family members off because they didn't agree with them fully on the issue.
You want to know what's done to my family? Because my sister is Democratic now.
Right, and I remember you telling me it kind of she doesn't really talk to you guys as much anymore.
That wasn't even just because of the Democratic thing. That was because she was blatantly. causing problems in the family. Like with her husband and stuff, they were doing some shady stuff, which is, you know, it
Right.
was
Obviously,
it was a weird,
podcast isn't the best place to just.
yeah, it was a weird situation. Let's just put it that way. There was nothing wrong. Like she wasn't causing, like she wasn't doing illegal stuff or anything like that. I just feel like what happened was her husband was kind of doing things that separated her from the family, and or vice versa. I like obviously I wasn't behind doors. I didn't know everything that was going on. I just knew there was a lot of stuff that was going on. So, but I didn't know the exact details. But what I do know is she voted Democratic this year, and my family, they love her to death. You know, that's their daughter, and she's my sister. But we literally will not talk politics around her. We made it purpose to like change from news channels, no matter which one it was. We switch it off because A, she did not feel comfortable in that environment of even discussing it, and it wasn't like, oh, we're bashing her for it. We're just like, so what's your reasoning behind it? You know, like I was
Right.
like, what do you think about this rigged election or a possibility of this rigged election? Or, you know, why don't you like this policy from Trump? Like, what are the policies that Biden are giving that you're okay with? Or you throw out some logic to it, like his increase in wages for the rich, and the rich aren't going to pay it anyway because they use tax write-offs. It was stuff like that, but like it just it became taboo. It became taboo because we didn't want to make her uncomfortable, and it was because we were Republican that she was like, I don't want to discuss it.
Right. And I felt that a little bit too with the and kind of tying into what you said about how people who don't learn to read both sides become more radicalized. Um, Somebody in my life definitely feeling more and more like they may have become more radicalized, and whenever I go and talk to this particular family member, you can't have a general conversation with them without them bringing up how they're right, and you're like, but you're not right, because I know historically what this kind of policy or whatever this is
Yeah,
does, because one of the nice things about history is it can kind of give you this whole guiding thought process on some of the things that keep popping up.
yeah,
And this
because
person who's been radicalized, he he doesn't pick up on that, and now you can't have a conversation about politics or about policies, or hell, I even went to ask them about I'm looking at trying to buy a house soon, and somehow even that was a way to wiggle in his political viewpoint.
and I feel like that's it's so wrong. My own father has become, I wouldn't say radicalized right, but he's become a lot further right with this election,
Right,
where like, there's so much distrust and unbelievability that like I've heard stuff that came out of his mouth, and I love my dad. I respect him with all my heart. You
right.
know,
But what he said shook you to your core, didn't it?
yeah. But what he said to me, I was like, I can't believe you. I was like, even when you hear the left side, neither of these sides are right. Why are you trying to defend yours? I was like, you should see that that's wrong, and so is the other side.
Right, and I think that's one of the big things that social media really ties into. This is they're breeding this distrust, then they're showing us what we want to see, and they're selling it.
Yep. And that's why I said like Google's really bad for it, where they take a general area of where you live, and they will show you specific research or search results for it. So like if you were to type in the political party here, if you were to type in election or like political policies, they're going to pull up Republican policies here, or like articles about the Republicans here. If you were to go over to like let's say a big city, like if you were to go to Portland, or if you were going to go into California and you pulled that up, guess what? Boom, you got
Democratic,
Democratic stuff only. It won't show you the other side at all. It's going
unless you
to
specifically search it.
exactly, and that's in itself a very bad business practice, in my opinion. I feel like that's negligence, and that all of these riots and all of these protests that turned into riots should be held accountable to. every source of media. That includes the news from Fox to CNN to all our social media, to Facebook, to Google, to Twitter, all of them.
Everything.
Every one of them is responsible because every single one kept pushing and pushing and trying to cause us to go into a revolution. And
And
I know the big reason is it generates money, but you shouldn't be putting a price tag on people's lives because that's exactly what they're doing.
and then somebody from the left is going to say, well, that's exactly why socialism works. And let me tell you, pushing socialism just means that price tag now sticks with you for life.
Yes, exactly. You have
So,
certain worth, and there's no going up or down.
right, exactly. One thing I recommend all of our listeners, as few or as many as there are, there's two books I recommend them reading or listening to if they're an Audible type of person. One of them is Animal Farm by George Orwell. It highlights exactly what I just said about how we all have a price tag and we're only as good as our price tag lasts.
Yep.
And then the other one is that book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I really recommend the Audible because it's almost like a podcast format while he's reading the book.
His
Um,
voice sounds like butter. But
but he really helps you understand how the best way to hold yourself accountable and others accountable. I mean, Zach does a really good job of holding me accountable when I say something wrong. We typically after the session ends and you guys stop hearing this recording, we go back and we listen to some of the things we say and go, well, maybe we need to address this next episode. And we encourage you guys to discuss with us are some of the things that we talked about that you feel we were wrong with.
yep, and things you may have observed, you know.
Exactly. Like the best way to combat the one-sidedness that social media generates is by having that conversation.
Yes, you
Now,
share
don't
it. Like
right,
you just share your opinion with your peers. It may cause conflict, but that causes growth. You don't have to be out there and trying to fight someone, but you can just be like, hey, you know, this is what I'm thinking. What are you thinking?
right. And if it
Like,
starts to lead to physical or conflict, that's when
just
to just back off. You know,
back out. Like if they start raising their voice, if they cannot hear the other side, that just tells you that this person is so close-minded that more than likely whatever they're trying to push, you don't want to hear in the first place because it does not have any premise for proof or evidence or anything of the sort.
right? They
Uh,
just want
it-
to live in
it-
their blissful ignorance.
Exactly. It is just whatever they've heard, and then they manipulate it to whatever they need it to be to make themselves feel like they're right.
So, and that's kind of our last little bit of wisdom. One of the last things we're going to talk about real quick before we wrap this up, change of format. We've we're still sticking with I shouldn't say change of format, change of the way we're going to kind of produce the channel.
So
Because of this long hiatus, we've kind of come to the consensus that sometimes myself, your host Robbie, or Zach might host an episode not necessarily by ourselves because we tend to want to bring guests on, people who want to speak about issues, but one of us might not be there, um,
I,
and that
I
should help us push a couple more episodes out.
yeah, and I just want to point this out. If I can't find someone or something like that, and I do host one by myself, I just want you to know it's going to be some absurd thing about like why freaking caramel taffy is the best or something like that. It's something
Right,
ridiculous, and stupid, but hopefully people will get a kick out of.
right, because this doesn't have to just be a political or a serious
Well,
conversation.
we
We
never
tend
planned on that. We still wanted to bring in who was it? Tom, talk about game design and stuff like that. Obviously, he has to have the time too, but
right. It's just we've been running into some smaller issues that we realize have compounded into some major issues, and it hasn't been fair to the people who actually want to listen to us, which I was surprised when people kept messaging me, "Why haven't you guys posted lately?"
Yeah, which, in all honesty, means a lot to us. So I didn't get any of the text, so I'm feeling a little left out. But I will say it does feel good to know that people actually enjoy listening to these and like to have the discussion. I don't know exactly what your mindset on them was. You might be listening to them and just laughing your ass off, like these people are fucking idiots. But I do appreciate it either way because it just gets it out there. Even if you're laughing at it, you might go tell it to joke at someone else, and they might be like, "Well, I mean, it's funny, but I kind of like the idea." You never know.
Right. It's nice to know that there are people out there that support what we're doing,
Yeah.
and we appreciate it. So, thank you guys, and we just wanted to put out that little announcement that you might see a little bit of a change in some of the recording and the
Oh,
way we record.
yeah. So get ready for that taffy episode. It's coming. I
All
will
right.
post
Well.
you on my saltwater taffy.
All right. Well. We thank you guys. This was the Gentleman's Jury with your host Robbie,
And your co-host Zach.
and we'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one.